I stood there, staring at the polished mahogany coffin as it was lowered into the damp earth. The rain was falling softly, masking the tears streaming down my face. My father, the only person who had ever truly understood me, was gone. But as the priest spoke about eternal peace, I felt a sharp tug on my sleeve. I turned to look at my wife, Vanessa. She was dressed in an impeccable black designer dress, wearing oversized sunglasses that hid her eyes. She leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear. I expected a word of comfort, maybe a simple "I love you." Instead, she whispered 5 words that froze the blood in my veins. "I want a divorce, Michael." I stared at her, unable to process what I had just heard. We were at my father's funeral. The soil hadn't even covered his casket yet. She didn't wait for my reaction. She pulled back, checked her diamond watch, the one I had bought her for our 5th anniversary, and added, "My lawyer will send the papers to your office on Monday. With your father gone, I think it's time I finally live the life I deserve. And don't worry about the money. I've already done the math on the inheritance. Half of it is mine." She smirked, turned on her heel, and walked away toward the waiting limousine, leaving me standing alone in the rain. At that moment, I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, cold clarity. Vanessa thought she had won. She thought my father's death was her winning lottery ticket to a payout of $250 million. But there was one thing Vanessa didn't know, one tiny detail about my father and his last will and testament that was going to change everything. She thought she was walking away with a fortune. In reality, she was walking straight into a trap. To understand how we got to that moment at the cemetery, you have to understand who we were, or rather, who I thought we were. I met Vanessa 7 years ago. I was working as a junior architect in my father's firm. Unlike typical Nepo babies, my dad, Arthur Sterling, was a man of principles. He made me start at the bottom. I fetched coffee, I printed blueprints, and I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. I lived in a small apartment downtown, not the sprawling estate where I grew up. My father's rule was simple. If you want to inherit the empire, you have to know how to build the foundation. Nobody at the office knew I was the heir to the Sterling construction dynasty. To them, I was just Michael, the quiet guy in the corner cubicle. And that's how I met Vanessa. She was the new marketing coordinator, beautiful, ambitious, and seemingly down to earth. I remember our first date vividly. We went to a cheap diner because my paycheck was late. "I don't care about fancy dinners," she had told me, dipping a French fry into her milkshake. "I care about ambition. I care about where you're going, not where you are right now." I fell in love with that. I thought I had found a woman who loved me, not the Sterling name. We dated for 2 years. They were the happiest years of my life. When I finally introduced her to my father, he was skeptical. Dad had an instinct for people, a predator's instinct. He built a billion-dollar company from nothing so he could smell a fake from a mile away. After their first dinner, my dad pulled me into his study. "She's hungry, Michael," he warned, pouring himself a scotch. "Of course she is, Dad. She's ambitious, just like us," I defended her. My dad shook his head. "No, there is a difference between hunger for success and hunger for things. Watch your wallet, son, and watch your back." I ignored him. I was young and blinded by love. I proposed to Vanessa a month later. When she saw the ring, a modest diamond, all I could afford on my junior architect's salary, she hesitated for a split second. A flicker of disappointment crossed her face before she forced a smile and said yes. That should have been my first red flag. Things changed the moment we got married, or rather, the moment I was promoted and my father finally revealed to the company that I was his son and heir apparent. Overnight, the modest Vanessa vanished. First, it was the car. "A Sterling can't drive a Honda, Michael. It looks bad for the brand," she argued. We leased a Porsche. Then it was the house. "This apartment is suffocating me. We need space for our future family." We bought a mansion we didn't really need. But the real change wasn't material. It was emotional. She became cold, distant. I worked 18-hour days trying to prove myself to my father,
And whenever I came home exhausted, Vanessa wasn't there to support me. She was at galas, charity events, or networking dinners. She loved being Mrs. Sterling. She loved the access, the VIP tables, the envy in other women's eyes. But she stopped loving Michael. 6 months ago, my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive. The doctors gave him weeks, maybe months. I was devastated. I moved back into the family estate to care for him in his final days. I expected my wife to be by my side. Instead, she complained. "Why do you have to be there every night?" She whined over the phone while I was changing my father's IV drip. "We have nurses for that. You're neglecting me, Michael, and frankly, the smell of that house is depressing." I hung up on her. That was the night my father, frail and weak, grabbed my hand. "She's waiting for me to die, Michael," he whispered, his voice raspy. "She's counting the days. She thinks once I'm gone, the trust fund opens up and she can cash out." "I know, Dad," I admitted, tears stinging my eyes. "I think you were right about her." My dad squeezed my hand with surprising strength. A mischievous, weak smile appeared on his face. "Don't worry," he wheezed. "I've made arrangements. Call my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. Tell him we need to make an amendment to the will. A special clause, just for her." I didn't know what he meant at the time. I thought it was just the medication talking. But now, standing at his grave, watching Vanessa's limo drive away, I realized my father had played one last game of chess.
Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I hadn't slept. I spent the weekend in my father's study, surrounded by his books and the smell of his old tobacco pipe, just trying to feel close to him one last time. I was shaken from my thoughts by the sound of heavy trucks in the driveway. I looked out the window. It wasn't the divorce lawyer. Not yet. It was worse. 3 large vans marked Lux Interiors were parking on the lawn. My father's pristine lawn that he had tended to for 40 years. I stormed downstairs and threw open the front door. Vanessa was standing there, holding a clipboard, directing a team of movers. "Careful with that," she shouted at 2 men carrying a marble statue. "That's going in the foyer." "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and rage. "Vanessa, we buried him 2 days ago." She didn't even look at me. She just kept ticking things off her list. "We're modernizing, Michael. This place smells like an old man. If I'm going to live here half the year as part of the settlement, I won't do it surrounded by this." She gestured vaguely at the house, as if my family legacy was trash. "You don't own this house," I snapped. "We haven't even read the will." She finally turned to me, lowering her sunglasses. That same cold smirk played on her lips. "Oh, honey, don't be naive. I've spoken to my legal team. Since you inherited the company shares during our marriage, and since I supported you while you cared for your dying father, I have a very strong claim to half of everything, including this estate. I'm just getting a head start on the renovations." She walked up to me and patted my cheek. "Don't fight it, Michael. It will be cheaper for you if you just sign the checks. You're weak. You've always been weak. Your father knew it, and I know it. You need someone to manage this empire. I'm doing you a favor."
An hour later, her threat from the funeral came true. A courier arrived with a thick envelope. I opened it in the kitchen. It was brutal. She wasn't just asking for a divorce. She was alleging emotional neglect and demanding a lump sum payment of $50 million immediately, plus a $100,000 a month in alimony and 50% of my future stock options in Sterling Construction. It was robbery, pure and simple. My phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson, my father's attorney. He had been with the family since before I was born. "Michael," his voice was gravelly and serious. "I assume you've received the papers from your wife's legal team." "I'm looking at them right now, Mr. Henderson. She wants blood." "She wants more than blood, son. She wants the marrow," Henderson replied. "She's been calling my office every hour demanding the reading of the will. She wants it done this Friday." "Friday?" I asked. "Yes, she's impatient. She claims she has investments pending that require liquidity." I laughed bitterly. "Investments? She's probably buying a private island." "Listen to me carefully, Michael," Henderson said, his tone shifting. Let her have the meeting on Friday. Don't fight her on the date. Bring her to the office. Let her bring her lawyers. Let her bring a marching band if she wants. Just make sure she is there." There was something in Henderson's voice, a suppressed energy. It wasn't fear. It sounded like anticipation. "Mr. Henderson," I asked quietly, "the amendment Dad made, the one he talked about in the hospital, is it real?" "I cannot discuss the contents of the will until the formal reading," he said formally. But then he added, "But I will say this. Your father was a brilliant man, Michael. He hated bullies, and he hated being taken for a fool. Just endure her for 4 more days. Can you do that?" "I can do that."
The next 4 days were a blur of humiliation. Vanessa didn't move out. Instead, she treated the house like a hotel, where I was the unwanted guest. She hosted a consolation dinner for her friends on Wednesday. I could hear them from my room upstairs. They were drinking my father's vintage wine, bottles worth $5,000 each, and laughing. I walked down to the kitchen to get water at 2 a.m., and I heard Vanessa on the phone on the patio. She was clearly drunk. "Yes, Marco, I know," she was saying. "Just put the deposit down on the villa in Tuscany. By next week, the wire transfer will clear. I'm going to be richer than God." "No, he won't fight back. He's a spineless puppy. He's probably crying into his pillow right now." She laughed, a cruel, cackling sound that echoed in the night. I stood in the darkness of the kitchen, gripping my glass of water so hard I thought it would shatter. Spineless puppy. That's what she thought. That's what everyone thought. The quiet son of the great Arthur Sterling. I went back upstairs, but I didn't cry. I packed a suit, my best suit, the one I wore when I graduated, the one my dad helped me pick out. I polished my shoes. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, yes, but the grief in my eyes was being replaced by something else, a cold resolve. Friday morning arrived. The sky was gray and heavy. Vanessa met me in the driveway. She was wearing a white suit, inappropriate for a grieving period, but perfect for a woman who thought she was about to be crowned queen. "Shall we take the Porsche?" she asked, dangling the keys. "You take the Porsche," I said, walking toward my old Honda Civic. "I prefer to drive myself." She rolled her eyes. "Suit yourself. Try not to break down on the way to the bank." She sped off, tires screeching. I got into my old car, turned the key, and took a deep breath. "Okay, Dad," I whispered to the empty seat beside me. "Let's see what you did."
The conference room at Henderson and Partners was colder than the grave I had just left. A long, polished table stretched across the room, with a view of the city skyline, a skyline my father helped build. On one side sat Vanessa and her attorney, a man named Mr. Sterling, no relation, just a shark in an expensive suit. They had folders, calculators, and a look of predatory hunger. I sat alone on the other side. At the head of the table sat Mr. Henderson. He placed a single, thick leather binder on the table. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Vanessa's lawyer started, checking his watch. "My client is going through a difficult emotional time. We'd like to expedite the asset distribution so she can begin her healing process." I almost choked. Healing process? She was booking villas in Tuscany. Mr. Henderson ignored him. He put on his reading glasses slowly, deliberately. "We will proceed according to Arthur Sterling's instructions. Not a moment faster, not a moment slower." He opened the binder. "To my son Michael," Henderson began, his voice steady, "I bequest the entirety of my controlling shares in Sterling Construction, the family estate in the Hamptons, and the vintage car collection."
Vanessa's eyes lit up. She leaned over to her lawyer and whispered loud enough for me to hear. "Half of the shares. That's at least $100 million right there." Her lawyer nodded, scribbling furiously. Henderson continued listing assets. The portfolio was larger than even I knew. Offshore accounts, real estate in London, tech investments. The total valuation was approaching $300 million. With every million mentioned, Vanessa's posture straightened. She wasn't grieving. She was doing arithmetic. She looked at me across the table, not with love, but with the look a butcher gives a prize cow. Finally, Henderson closed the binder. The room went silent. "And now," Henderson said, "regarding the cash distribution and the spousal provisions,
Finally, Vanessa breathed out. "Let's hear it." Henderson didn't read from the paper. Instead, he picked up a remote control. Mr. Sterling anticipated that there might be complications regarding his estate. He recorded a video addendum 3 days before he passed. He instructed that this be played only if certain conditions were met. "What conditions?" Vanessa's lawyer asked sharply. "The condition," Henderson said, looking directly at Vanessa, "that Michael attended this meeting alone, while his wife attended with legal counsel seeking separation." Vanessa's face went pale for a split second, but she recovered. "So, it's a video. Play it. It doesn't change the law. I'm his wife. California is a community property state." The screen descended from the ceiling, the lights dimmed, and there was my father. He was sitting in his hospital bed wearing his favorite silk pajamas. He looked weak, tubes in his nose, but his eyes were sharp as diamonds.
"Hello, Michael," the video dad said. I felt a lump in my throat. "If you are watching this, I am gone. And if you are watching this, it means I was right. Vanessa is sitting across from you, probably with a lawyer, probably wearing something expensive that I paid for." Vanessa gasped. "This is ridiculous. Turn it off." "Sit down," Henderson barked. It was the first time I'd ever heard him raise his voice. "Vanessa said." The video continued. "Vanessa," my father said, looking into the camera lens, "I knew you were a fraud the day you walked into my house. You never loved my son. You loved the lifestyle I provided. But I let it slide because I hoped I was wrong. I hoped you would grow to love him." My father leaned forward in the video, wincing in pain. "But then I got sick, and I watched you. I watched you ignore him. I heard your phone calls in the hallway when you thought I was asleep. I heard you talking to Marco." The room went deathly silent. Vanessa froze. Her lawyer stopped writing. "Yes, I know about Marco," my father continued with a dark smile. "And I know you were waiting for me to die so you could divorce Michael and take half my money to Italy. So, here is the situation. I have restructured my entire estate into a generation-skipping trust. The beneficiary is Michael alone. The assets are not his property. They belong to the trust. He is merely the trustee." Vanessa's lawyer slammed his hand on the table. "That's a loophole. We can pierce the corporate veil. We will sue." "I'm not done," the video dad interrupted, as if he could hear them. "However, I have left a specific bequest for you, Vanessa. In the event that you have filed for divorce, which Mr. Henderson has confirmed you have, you trigger Clause 7A of my will." In the video, my father held up a single crisp piece of paper. Clause 7A states, if the spouse of the heir has filed for divorce or separation prior to the distribution of assets, she is entitled to a one-time lump sum payment, conditioned on her signing a non-disclosure agreement and waiving all future claims. Vanessa's eyes widened. She looked at her lawyer. "A lump sum? How much? Is it 5 million? 10? She looked back at the screen, desperate. My father paused for dramatic effect. "The sum," he said, "is exactly $1. Vanessa screamed. "What?" $1, my father repeated. "And there is a reason. Under state law, you cannot completely disinherit a spouse without cause, or they can contest the will. By leaving you $1, I acknowledge you as my son's wife, fulfilling the legal requirement. I am not forgetting you. I am remembering you and exactly how much you are worth." Furthermore, my father added, "if you contest this will, the trust has instructions to release the private investigator's file I've compiled on you and Marco to the press. The photos, the credit card statements, the hotel bookings, everyone in this city will know exactly what you are." The screen went black. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. I looked at Vanessa. The arrogance was gone. The mask had shattered. She looked small, cornered, and terrified. "He can't do that," she whispered to her lawyer, her voice trembling. "Tell me he can't do that." Her lawyer, the shark, was slowly closing his folder. He looked at the blank screen, then at Henderson, then at the massive stack of documents Henderson was holding, the evidence. "Actually," her lawyer said, standing up and adjusting his tie, "he can. It's a standard terror clause combined with a trust structure. It's ironclad." He looked down at Vanessa with disdain. "And since you don't have any money to pay my retainer anymore,
I think we're done here." He walked out. Vanessa was left alone with me and Henderson. She looked at me, eyes filling with fake tears, the gears in her head turning, trying to find a new angle. "Michael," she started, her voice soft, reaching for my hand. "Baby, please. It was a mistake. I was stressed. The grief made me crazy. I don't want a divorce. I love you. Let's tear up the papers. Let's go home." I looked at her hand, the hand that had signed the divorce papers while my father was dying. I looked at Mr. Henderson, who slid a single $1 bill across the mahogany table. I picked up the dollar. I stood up, and I delivered the final line. I looked at the single dollar bill in my hand. It was wrinkled. Just paper. Vanessa was still looking at me, her hand extended, tears streaming down her face, tears that stopped looking fake and started looking like genuine panic. "Michael," she pleaded again, "think about us. Think about the memories. We can fix this. I'll fire the lawyers. I'll sign a post-nup. Just don't do this." I walked around the table. I stood right in front of her. For the first time in 7 years, I felt taller than her. "You're right, Vanessa," I said softly. Hope flickered in her eyes. "I am?" "Yes. We have memories. I remember when you laughed at my car. I remember when you ignored me while my father was dying. And I remember you planning your Italian vacation with Marco while I was planning a funeral." Her face went white. The mention of Marco's name again was the final nail. She knew there was no way back. I took her hand, the one reaching for me, and I placed the wrinkled $1 bill into her palm. I closed her fingers around it. "This is your settlement," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Invest it wisely, because it's the last thing you will ever get from the Sterling family." I turned to Mr. Henderson. "I'm ready to sign the papers now." "Excellent," Henderson said, sliding the documents toward me. Vanessa stood there for a moment, trembling. She looked at the dollar, looked at me signing away our marriage, and then she let out a sound of pure frustration, a scream that was half sob, half rage. She swept her purse off the table and stormed out of the room, slamming the glass door so hard I thought it would shatter. When the door clicked shut, the silence in the room was beautiful. Mr. Henderson took off his glasses and smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Your father would have been proud of that performance, Michael." "He wrote the script," I replied, looking at the blank screen where my dad had just been. "I just acted it out." It's been 3 years since that day in the boardroom. A lot has changed. The first thing I did was sell the mansion. I couldn't live there anymore. The walls reeked of her perfume and her greed. I sold it at a loss, just to get rid of it quickly. I used the money to start a foundation in my father's name, dedicated to helping young architects from low-income backgrounds get their degrees. As for the company, Sterling Construction has doubled in size. I took my dad's advice. I kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed humble. I still drive to work early, but I admit, I traded the Honda Civic for a vintage Aston Martin. My dad left it to me in the will, and it felt wrong to leave it in the garage. And Vanessa, well, small towns talk, and big cities talk even faster. Marco, her Italian lover, turned out to be exactly what she was, a gold digger. When he found out she got $1 instead of 100 million, he dumped her before she even made it to the airport. Last I heard, she's living in a small apartment on the edge of the city, working as an assistant at a boutique. I saw her once, from a distance, at a coffee shop. She looked tired. She wasn't wearing designer sunglasses anymore. She saw me too. She saw me getting into the Aston Martin with my fiancée, Sarah, a pediatric nurse who didn't know my last name until our third date. Vanessa looked away. She knew she had gambled everything on a lie, and she lost.
My father used to say that money doesn't change people, it just unmasks them. He was right. It took a fortune to reveal who my wife really was, but it cost me nothing to find myself again. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't anger. It isn't fighting back. The best revenge is living a good life, being happy, and letting the trash take itself out. I'm Michael Sterling. I lost a wife, but I gained a future. And honestly, it was the best deal I ever made.
What would you have done in Michael's shoes? Would you have taken her back? Or was the $1 revenge exactly what she deserved? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of karma, revenge, and justice. See you in the next video.